I'll let Keith go to take that one. He got off mute quicker than I did.
One of the things that's really hard to do when you're in a Zoom meeting is to look straight at your camera. Now, if you're going to compete in a contest, I don't care whether you draw faces around that camera or whether you have a separate camera or you have it sitting right in front of you, but you've got to look at that camera because that's where your audience is, especially if you're in an online environment. The other thing that was very hard, and I got to admit that the second place person at the International Speech Contest there in Nashville did an excellent job of pausing when he was expecting audience reaction, and there was audience reaction during that. Now, that is a skill that I don't have, and you've got to know that the point that you're making is really going to impact the audience, so they will react. Because he paused, he hesitated. There were times in his speech that the audience reacted to his speech, but you got to understand, he can't hear that. He can't hear what's going on in the audience. So therefore, he's got to anticipate that and go with that. It's a skill. There's got to be a way to do that, but I don't know how he did it. It was really tough. But basically, you've got to look at that camera and you've got to focus yourself and all of your energy on that because that is your audience. Tramel.
Yeah, no, those are great points, Keith. I think the other thing I would add is I think every medium has its pluses and its minuses, right? So, I think that was evidenced by the fact that I think far more video participants did, better than a lot of people thought when the lineups were first announced. And I think that there's a certain amount of intimacy that you can reach in the virtual format, being able to be so close to the camera, to be able to see in granular detail facial expressions, even the slightest twitch of an eye or a slight smirk. Those things, even when you're blown up on a jumbotron in a hall, sometimes don't always show up in that way. So understanding the medium and what its inherent advantages are and what its disadvantages are, I think go a long way in helping you choose what sort of speech tools you want to employ. For sure, that in a live audience, if you're doing something for effect, or if you're doing something that's like slapstick or humor, you have the benefit of being in the room and judging, engaging the audience reception to that. In a virtual environment, there's a wall, there's a window, you don't know. And so there's a bigger risk of completely cutting off communication and alienating your audience and them watching you as opposed to being there with you. So certainly in a virtual environment, I think you tampen down the show. And I think you lean more towards an engaging, intimate conversation because that is what gets enhanced in the virtual format. The other thing I'll add is that just because a speech is delivered in the virtual format doesn't mean that it can't be practiced or had or shared in live audiences. So I think that, you take that feedback that you get from live audiences, you find out what traditionally over time, every time you give it stands out, and you find a way to amplify that through the benefits that virtual provides. And I think that's how you maintain a real strong connection with the audience in the virtual format.
Thank you. Does anyone else in the audience have any techniques or any insight into actually connecting with your audience in this online world that we live in now? Randy, I feel that you've got something to say. I find it hard to believe you don't.
Well, I think Tramel alluded to the fact that every type of speaking environment has its advantages and disadvantages. Disadvantage, of course, in the Zoom environment is that it's virtually impossible to portray the entire person, all the body language within this little cell. Now, you can do it like from the waist up or maybe even from the knees up, but the further back you get away from the camera, the more detail you tend to lose. However, if you look at this as this is my stage I can use assets of it. I can come close to it and get intimate with my audience, even in a Zoom format, or I can choreograph my speech to a certain extent, maybe move back a little bit and move from side to side like you're progressing through stages of life or the timeline of whatever your topic is or your speech happens to be. I think, as Keith has said, that the winner, I don't remember exactly which year it was, but the winner of the international contest at that time might not have won the contest had he been in a traditional on-stage environment. He used the Zoom cell very effectively to his own advantage. And so, you just have to realize there are limitations to this, but you can take advantage of that. You don't have to be stuck right in the middle, just a talking head. You can use all of the facilities you would use with a normal speech on stage, just realizing that you've got to make sure that it's going to be seen within this little box that you're doing. Of course, if you are in a live environment, well, the world's your stage there. Some of the most successful speakers that I've seen have been ones who have been able to use the entire length and breadth of that speaking area, going from stage left, backstage left to forward stage right, in advancing like a timeline, like I was talking about earlier. And one of the things that I think that limits the effectiveness of most of our Toastmaster speakers, or many of our Toastmaster speakers, whether they're contestants or not, is that they leave out the element of choreography. I think you need to not just go with the flow or how you feel, but actually plan the movements that you're going to make through the life of your speech, and make sure that those movements are things which emphasize the points that you're trying to make at that particular time. Darren LaCroix in his championship speech was very effective in doing that. I'm trying to think of another. There have been so many of the champions back before the Zoom era that did that made such effective use of the entire stage and choreographing their movements so that they added to it. So it was not just the gestures and the body movement, and the eye contact at the moment, but how they were moving on the stage. Like someone had an experience here early in their career and they stand over at this part, or they stand over at that part, whichever way to you indicates the progression of time. And then they move to another that is another scenario within their speech, and then another scenario, or backwards and forwards. It's taking advantage of what you have, and just realizing that there are some limitations within the Zoom environment, but you can still make use of this little box to maximum effect, as long as it goes along with your topic and your theme and what you're trying to say.
Well, thank you, Randy. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to this, connecting with your audience? You think we've fallen into a trap of using too much of the PowerPoint? I belong to one club where I feel that fallen into that trap, where they have several speakers they speak from PowerPoint almost every time. Is it a crutch? What do you think?
It's a lot easier to use PowerPoint or whatever display in this particular medium, as far as instead of doing that at a speech contest. Trammell, you'd love this. I remember a speech contest where this gal come in with the slide projector and set the slide projector down and looked for a screen that she could put us on, and there was nothing but a white wall. And her speech was, her international speech was basically a speech about her travels internationally. And she would show slides from what's going on. So I'm not saying PowerPoint's a bad thing, but you got to understand where we came from. We used to do strange things in speech contests. I don't know you could get by with maybe in an online, like in an online speech contest, somehow enhance your ability to do backgrounds or different things. I haven't seen Trammell do this yet, but I've always been looking for that particular speaker that somehow, and again, you got to realize the first time we did speech contest online, Toastmasters International forbade any backgrounds whatsoever. You could not use a virtual background. Just same as what I've got behind me here. Toastmasters ruled that, said you can't do that. Now they've changed that, but again, nobody's taken advantage of it. Can you imagine someone that would actually interact with their background and give a speech? It'd be nothing more than a green screen, like a movie type thing, like you're talking about movies, Trammell. Can you believe, I could see a speech doing that where you would actually interact with the background. So it would be you, but oh, that would be interesting.
I think the thing to remember is, first and foremost, you're giving a speech, right? This isn't you're not giving a multimedia communication, right? Primarily, you're here to work on your spoken communication, and you can use visual aids, but it's important to remember that they are visual aids, right? So they're there to supplement what is to be primary, which is your verbal communication. And I think having that as your North Star, I think, helps keep things in perspective. It's always good. I've always been taught that on a PowerPoint, except for graphics that you might point out, the words that are on a PowerPoint shouldn't be the words that come out of your mouth. It really should be a compliment. It shouldn't be like a script or your bullet point notes that you want to run off, because what happens is that as people are reading, they're not fully able to digest every word that you're saying. So it's better to have less information, maybe have some graphic visuals that punctuate the points that you're communicating and enhance, rather than, giving basically the audience the script to your talk and let them read ahead, while you're talking. Those are just a few notes that I picked up with how to utilize PowerPoints effectively as a compliment as opposed to a crutch.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Trammell is saying, and I would encapsulate it this way. If you have a PowerPoint presentation, the purpose of whatever, any kind of graphic software it may happen to be, the purpose of that graphic presentation is to enhance what you're trying to say, add a picture or maybe a few words that encapsulate the points that you're trying to make at that point. So it is to add to the speech. It is not to be the speech, if you understand what I'm saying.
See, we have a hand up. Cynthia.
Yes, I have a question from someone as your chat watcher, and they're asking, how do speakers handle dealing with fear? And what did they do to overcome that fear? What did you do to overcome that fear?
Yes, I'll take this one. When you talk to like a lot of professional athletes, and you ask them about, how they deal with nerves or jitters, and how did you get to a point where, you can play in some of these the biggest stages, the biggest games, these pressure cookers, and be so composed. And, the interesting part about it is a lot of them say, oh, I still get the butterflies. I still deal with all of that. I just know that I have to go. And then, once everything starts, your body, your instinct, your practice, the skill that you've worked to develop take over. And that's largely what I would say is that to this day, when I give every introduction to every speech contest, I'm so nervous that while I'm smiling, waiting for, the Toastmaster to introduce me, my lip is, quivering, because there's just like this nervous anticipation of wanting to start. And I think that those things tell you that you're alive. they tell you that what you're doing matters and it's important. So I don't think you try to get rid of that. I think you find a way to channel it and know that, okay, I'm feeling this right now, but in a few moments, in a few seconds, skill and instinct are going to take over. And that's what you work. That's what you work on. That's what the purpose of preparation of skill is that you do it so many times that you get to a point that once it's time to go, your skill and your preparation take over. And before you know it, you're having a lovely conversation with the audience, and you can't even remember those quivering lips that were happening in the beginning. So that's what I'd share.
As Darren LaCroix always says, stage time, stage time, stage time. Get up in front of people until you feel comfortable. And yes, Trammell is right. Every time you do it, there's a little bit of butterflies, there's a little bit of nervousness, especially for contests when you are introduced and you have to stand up in front of them and give a speech. So the more you do it, the better you will feel comfortable doing it. And it's just, you got to get up and speak.
The day that you are not nervous to some extent before you give a speech is the day that you are no longer a viable speaker, in my opinion. Because a little bit of nerves, controlled nerves, keeps you on your toes. So I've got to get a hold of this thing and do it. And then the second aspect behind it is the whole thing depends upon the confidence in what you've done, the product that you put together. And it goes all the way back to the preparation that Keith was talking about, and then the practice and the construction of the entire picture, not just the words, but the entire picture of that speech, to the point where you have supreme confidence in the product that you put together and that you have an excellent presentation of that product. It's the confidence that helps you control the nerves. Now, other people will talk about, take deep breaths or do some push-ups or things like that. Those might help. But the biggest thing is the confidence in, and like I say, the product that you prepared, that you can present that and make it something of value to your audience.
I don't know if you've heard of this, but there is actually a physical response. It's the vagus nerve kicking in, and it's a fight or flight situation. It's a reptilian situation where you want to survive, so you're going to fly. The flight is there. That's what you're trying to overcome with these nerves. And you can overcome that with practice. And each time you give a speech or you speak in table topics, that's what you're overcoming, is that flight option of the vagus nerve. And it's entirely possible to do that, to help overcome that. Now, yeah, Randy, you're right. If you're ever completely comfortable speaking, it's time to give it up because you've lost it. But yes, there should always be a bit of nerves, especially in the big speeches. That's true, but there's some physical responses involved that you can control. And if you look that up, I did some research for another speech, and the vagus nerve is definitely there, and it will definitely kick in when you're nervous. And your first reaction is, I got to get out of here because this isn't going to work. But then you capture it and take it by the horns and just practice and be ready. And once you get, as Trammell says, once you start into it, your instinct kicks in and it'll be fine. You'll do well.
I don't know, but were you calling us lizards, Cynthia?
Oh, I said no. I said reptilian.
Reptilian
Response. This is a reptilian part of your brain still exists.
Speak for yourself.
Okay.
No, I agree with you. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I know you.
All right, another question has come through and it's asked is, in all of your competitions, have you been distracted that you lost your place? And what did you do to gain it back or to get back on track?
Well, many of you know that I've competed a number of times. I have never got it to the point where I've lost it. And I think with me, that goes back to that preparation I'm talking about, where I'm confident in the presentation, and also a little bit of the planning that helps me get from one transition to the next by, creating mental images that take me from one point to the other. I have seen it happen, and this was at a semifinal at an international convention. A speaker, I think he was from either Australia or New Zealand, got up on the stage and got to a point in his speech, and it was gone. And he didn't get it back. He just, he gave up. And then an amazing thing happened. All of the other contestants kind of came up and surrounded him, hugged him, gave him support, and that was a beautiful type of moment. But if you have, like I say, if you've got yourself to the point where you have confidence in the presentation that you're giving, that shouldn't happen. If you have, particularly if you put those little memory hooks in there that get you from one point to the next in your speech.
Well, I'll add, Randy, I wish I had your mental capabilities, because even I stumble and forget places. I think that there is a variety of things that lend itself to creating that, but a few techniques that have helped. I would say, if you ever get to a point where you lose your place, never stop speaking. Do not stop talking, even if it sounds like, rambling to you. Talk, because when you stop and you try to find your words, 1 second feels like 20 seconds, and you're going to start to panic, which then reinforces the pressure, and leads you to now being focused in panic mode, as opposed to realizing that you're having a conversation with the audience. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say is that most of the time, the stuff that you forget or the places that you lose, the audience doesn't know. And chances are, trying to go back and remember those words would be inconsequential to the impact of the speech. I've been in situations where I'm giving a speech and I said, a part completely out of sequence. And I realize it and I let it go. And I'm having such a good time with the audience that I find a way to tie it back in later at some point. I improvise. And I think that's a part that you have to remember. At the end of the day, you're giving a speech, you're giving a communication. Give yourself the grace that, if you mess up, keep going, keep talking, and that will be, what helps you. The other technique that I use is, when I'm working on a prepared speech, I tend to block it in sections. Usually no more than 45 to 90 seconds. And I practice those segments out of order. So I practice segment 5, just out of the blue. And I practice it in the shower. I practice it talking really fast. I practice it talking really slow. And what that does is it kind of locks in those places in your speech. So if you ever lose track, you can just go to the next segment and continue on. So those have been a few techniques that have helped me work through that.
I think the most interesting one that I had, and Ann's not here tonight, Ann Gentle was giving a speech at Union Pacific in their conference room. And it was in an evening session. And of course, businesses have these automatic timers on their lights. Well, as she's giving her speech in competition, the lights go out. Ann does not miss a beat. She doesn't stop. She doesn't do anything. She continues on in the dark with her speech. You can hear these footsteps at the back of the room, thump, 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 but she's still giving her speech. You hear this bang, bang, bang. And all of a sudden the lights come on and Ann is still there giving her speech. She never skipped a beat. It was amazing. I have never seen anybody do that before. The other situation that I've seen, and Randy was there at the time, this was at the fall 1991 humor speech contest. One of the gals that got up on stage. Now, here's the interesting part. For the microphone that we had, We had it draped around our necks, basically, and we had a cord that you had to negotiate as you're walking across the stage. Tramel, these were the old days, you know, back when we didn't have such things. We had a VHS recorder because I've got the video of it, but it wasn't really digital. It was an analog thing. Anyway, she's on stage. She gets wrapped up in this cord and trips and falls on the stage. She turns, she gets herself up, she brushes herself off, and she goes on with her speech. Now, again, I haven't seen it very often where people were able to recover from incidents on the stage, but it's one of those things, like Tramel says, if you practice it enough, no matter what happens, you can go on and give your speech.
There's another technique that can be used. For some 20 years, I was the director of an Easter play at our church, which was a reenactment of the Living Last Supper. Probably many people have seen this. The presentation called "Is It I?" And this is one where each of the disciples gives a little talk, which is their reaction at that point in the Last Supper when Jesus has said, "One of you is going to betray me." And every one of these little speeches ends with, "Is it I? Is it I, Lord?" That's a question. And what I taught my actors to say is if they ever really get lost in their presentation and they can't remember what was going on, the out is to remember that last line, because that's really the most important thing. You remember to say, "Is it I?" Well, that's not directly applicable to speech, but what you can do is that you have something which you have memorized, which directly relates to your topic and your theme, and that's your go-to point. That's your safety out, if you will, if you absolutely lose it and can't remember where you are in the particular speech. So that's something you might try.
And self-deprecating humor never fails. I mean, when all else fails, just talk about what you're feeling with the audience. Just, you're not going to believe this, but I don't know what to tell you next. And have fun with it. I mean that. The audience is there; they're supporting you. They would be as horrified as you, would. So just remember, especially in Toastmasters environment, everyone's supportive. Everybody wants to see you succeed. Have your backup plans, but when all else fails, don't forget about the self.
That's a good point, Tramel, because I think we don't realize very often is that the audience really wants to see you succeed. They don't want to listen to a failed presentation. They want to see you succeed, and so they'll go with you a long way. Now, there's a point you can go beyond their patience with what's going on, but for the most case, the audience really wants you to succeed and wants you to get back to it, and they'll be supportive of that.
It reminds me, there was this one. I'm sorry.
Oh, go right ahead, Tramel.
No, I was just going to share this funny. It was one of my first competitions in Toastmasters, a humorous speech contest. And about 2 minutes in, I completely lost my train of thought. And so I was trying to find it. And, it's the summer in Los Angeles in a church with no air conditioning, and it's hot. We're all sweating. Everyone's sweating. And so I just give up and I say, you know what? It's really hard to remember what you got to say when it's 106 degrees in the, and the whole audience just erupts into laughter and you riff off that and you get back in. So again, just like another practical point of, just have fun with the audience. They'll be there to bail you out.
We have another question. This person is asking, how do you actually practice once you have your speech written? For example, do you record yourself, speak in front of a mirror? What do you do?
Trying to let someone else go first.
Best way to do this is what Trammell is probably going to tell you is go find other people to speak in front of, because you're going to go to other clubs, go to clubs you haven't been to, go to clubs that don't know who you are, whether that's online or in person. And especially the ones that Trammell has done is basically around the world, because go find an international audience, see whether or not your speech actually makes an impact on them, whether they react to it or not. Because the thing that we keep probably doing is if we enter a narrow area just within our own district, probably pretty much if you've done this several times, as pretty much the district has seen you. So if you get outside your district, get outside your country, go find other places to give your speeches, you're going to find out whether that speech is going to be an international speech or not, depending on what the topic is, of course. But that's the best way I know to do it.
Well, I
Yeah.
think as someone that has competed but hasn't gone very far, I think that it's individualized. The question was in regards to once you prepare, you got your speech written. What do? I practice. I keep practicing until I practice and can't practice no more, and then I will record. Have my children come over, adults, and my husband, and ask them. Then once I feel comfortable there, then I will go and say, hey, home club, whatever the situation may be, and practice there. And if it's for something outside of Toastmasters, then I call in people that I know, that knows wherever, what church it is. And so that they can give me tips and like, oh, you shouldn't say that, or how about saying this about a pastor, giving me tips about what's going on in their church to be able to know, how to handle the situation.
Yeah, I always make it a point, if I can, to get a video and an audio recording. And one of the first things I do is I always want to listen to the audio first, usually pretty quickly after I speak, because my position is if the speech is not interesting and doesn't pass, if the speech doesn't pass the radio test, as I call it, if I don't feel the impact of the speech by just hearing the words, then I know that there's something I need to work. The other thing I do is I'll watch the video with sound, but sometimes I like to just watch the video, turn off the sound, and just watch the body language in space. Those things will give you a different impact on your speech. Sometimes listening to the words can maybe distract from realizing, well, I got this really weird tendency with my left hand, when I do this. So it allows you to kind of focus and see things to give you a little bit more perspective. In terms of, what you do once you have it all written out, I think the important thing to remember is, that your script is a suggestion. You still want to give yourself a chance to be live and a certain amount of leeway on the stage to veer off the script. Not too much, but to be able to interact with the audience where it makes sense and make on the fly suggestions. And the benefit of giving your speech to multiple places and in different areas is that the audience will let you know things that you don't know. I have had audience crack up at moments that I thought were sentimental, and I've had funny moments that I thought were funny that had people feeling sentimental. The opposite. And so it's important to try that, because different people have different reactions to your speech, and it gives you additional items to play with when you know the potential impact. Just the way you say something can make the difference between whether it has a sentimental impact or a humorous impact. So there's a few tools to consider. I actually had someone, they went through the CC manual and gave the same speech, and they changed their focus of the speech based off the objectives of the topic, the same speech, but it never really felt like the same speech. Watching people go through that and seeing how speeches transform, where you're given the same speech for the most part, but you put the focus on a different perspective, how it can evolve and change the speech. So I've seen some people do that as well.
Do we have any other questions or anybody who would like to talk about an experience they've had while speaking?
I have a question. For the speakers, I've heard a couple of you talk about the CC manual, which I think is really a good tool to use. My question to you is, we have new members who have no idea what a CC manual is. How do you incorporate, I guess you would have to be a mentor to them, to incorporate the use of tools from days of old?
Keith, I think she mentioned your name specifically, so.
Well, if you've got someone that has only known pathways as far as the education program, and they want to be a competitive speaker, you introduce them to this new object, this digital form of a manual that you can learn from, and that it's not necessarily part, you don't have to go into this old education program or anything. This is a tool by what you're going to use to develop your speech. And you can actually take those individual speeches, including the icebreaker, and fit them in different places within the Pathways program. You do not, quote unquote, have to do the Pathways program in order like you used to have to do, where you'd have to do level 1 before you saw level 2, before you saw level 3. So there are places within that whole, no matter which path you've chosen, to get credit for giving a speech in front of an audience, but you can use that CC manual as the guiding thing that says, okay, what am I going to use? Am I going to use vocal variety in this speech? Am I going to use rhetorical devices in this speech? Am I going to use this speech to persuade someone or be inspirational? Those are all part of the whole CC manual. And you can use that, say, hey, take a look at this and use this as a tool, but get credit through the pathway system.
But if you really want to go through the CC manual, just look up an old fart like Keith or George or me.
I'm an oldie myself. I don't need, I've done many CCs too. But I was thinking of the newbies, the new people who come in who are not familiar with how the manuals were broken down.
I'm sure we'd be happy to dig out one. I've got some stashed somewhere. I can find them. I do have a question though, Mr. Keith. I would like to know what you think the difference is between topic and theme. To me, they seem to overlap.
Okay, so here's the deal. A topic is a specific thing. If I'm going to talk about kites, okay, then my topic is kites. Whereas theme is something that actually is more less concrete, less specific. In other words, if my theme is to, how do I say this? If I have a theme that's going to express some type of an emotion or something throughout my speech, then I have a certain theme and I'll bring up topics that support that particular theme. A topic would be just like I say, less kites. And really, you have a topic, and underneath that topic, you have a theme or a purpose. So your topic may be one thing, but your theme and purpose may be what's really the comparable thing as opposed to just between topic and theme. Kathy.
For your example, maybe the theme would be never give up. And then,
right.
Then you could frame that around kites.
Right. Never give up, no matter how many times Charlie Brown loses his kite in the tree. The theme would be to never give up. So that purpose would be to get the point across that you're never going to give up, no matter how many times you lose that kite. Does that help?
Yep.
Any other questions, comments, experiences? Evelyn? Yes.
I think when you talk about themes, it's general, and you can go so many places with the theme versus sticking to a topic. You know, like you said, a topic is very specific, and it really doesn't lend you to go many places with it. That's why I like themes better than topics, because you can do a lot more with that, you know, with your theme.
Very true. Thank you, Evelyn.
Tramel, you said something in your speech that I heard. I can't remember if it was Darren LaCroix that said this or someone else, but it was another championship speaker that I saw in person, not competing in person, but just came to one of our conferences. And he mentioned tearing your speech apart, throwing it on the floor, and that you can pick it up anywhere on the floor and be able to talk about it. You know, not go in the order that you're going to speak about it, but just randomly, you know, and that's what he would do if he coached you. You know, he would tear your presentation apart and would throw it out and just pick it up randomly. And, you know, you don't think about doing that when you are preparing for a speech because you're so focused on saying all the words correctly, not losing your place and things like that. But I noticed, because, you know, I haven't competed a lot, but I noticed just giving speeches, I never give my speech the way that I practiced it. And I don't know if that is a lack of preparation. I don't know what you call that, but I can go over my speech over and over and over again. But the more I go over it, it's like it takes on a whole new pair of legs. That it is not the same thing that I started out with. And so my question to both of you all, you know, because you all say you practice over and over and over again, but how do you make sure in that practicing that you don't rewrite the essence of your presentation?
Yeah, so there's a certain concept. It goes by a couple of different names, but the one that resonates with me the most, it's called basically. I don't know. I'm losing track of what I wanted to say, but the effect of it is truth in the moment, right? And I think that came from some Disney storytellers. I think it was in an article called "The Four Truths of a Storyteller," and it talks about truth in the moment. And what that means is everything you've prepared to do, everything that you practice, it's there, right? But it's secondary to the experience that you're having with the audience, right? And if you are on that stage and you are having a moment with the audience where you want to riff on a joke, like an unexpected joke got a thunderous response, and you want to fill in the moment to riff on it, which can really have an impact on the audience. You got to give yourself permission to do that. And that's that live exchange with the audience, right? You practice to be prepared so that you are prepared to go off script when the audience, presents that opportunity. And that's the important thing to remember, because some of the best moments in speeches are unplanned. They just happen. Like Ramona Smith, she's giving that, her championship speech, and she just the audience gives her this feedback, and she just says, "Well, very nice." You add these little ad libs in there, and I think those are where some of the most memorable moments come from, and they come from that because you are in sync with the audience. And when that happens, you know, magic occurs in a way that you can't always practice. And so I'd say give yourself permission to have some leeway on stage, but practice so that you're prepared for whatever the audience wants to go, you know.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that for every speech that you give, there are three versions. The speech that you plan to give, the speech that you actually gave, and the speech that you wish you had given. And I think that's true, because the important thing is not every word and paragraph in exact order, exactly like you wrote it down on script. The important thing is the idea, the message that you want to give, or if you want to say the theme that you're talking about, the real essence of your thoughts is what's really important. And if you have practiced enough so that you are thoroughly familiar with your message, then it doesn't matter if it's not in apple pie 1, 2, 3 ABC order.
Think about your favorite speech. How many actual words do you recall verbatim? You know, you don't. You really mostly recall how they made you feel and maybe some impact lines, but you know, except for some really stellar human beings who have that cognitive ability, very few people remember every word that you say anyway. So I think what that does is put more emphasis on the impact and the theme, right? The theme that you want to impart rather than the words that you want to say. It tells you what's more important, which I think is a good thing. It keeps the focus on where it should be.
So in contrast to what Tramel and Randy have been saying, I have a tendency to memorize my speeches almost word for word, to the point where I am then comfortable with changing it on the fly. A simple example of that is at the Tall Tales speech in 2014. Jonathan Gardner and I are standing there, and it's about 10 minutes before the speech contest to go off. Randy's getting ready for the speech contest and the whole bit. And I'm standing there, and I told Jonathan, I said, Jonathan, dare me to put Abraham Lincoln in my speech, because Abraham Lincoln was not in my speech. And he said, you can't do that. Not 10 minutes before the speech. I said, dare me to do that. I said, I'm not a betting man, so I'm not going to bet you that I could do this, but dare me to do it. He says, okay, I dare you to do it. And in my speech, as I had memorized it well enough, I knew where I could put it in. And I actually put Abraham Lincoln in my speech because I knew it well enough and practiced it enough that I knew that I had some fluid portions of the speech, and I put it in. And as I did that, I'm looking straight at Jonathan, and Jonathan's sitting there with his mouth open like, how did he do that? How did he? So again, if you're comfortable enough with your speech, if you practiced it enough, and every individual is different, you can have then some leeway as to what your speech can do. Kathy wants to say something.
Yeah, she's been very patient. Kathy?
I just have a quick question. Keith put in the chat a link from Mike Carr, 2020. I'm sorry if you said that during one of your responses, but I don't know what it's about.
Randy made reference to Mike Carr and the fact that this was really the first international speech contest where we did it online, and how Mike effectively used his position on the camera. If you look at that speech, which is that link, he actually almost starts off camera and he comes on to camera. He is actually using the video medium of his camera effectively in giving his speech. And he did that in such a way that it caught a lot of people off guard. And that's part of the reason he won the speech contest. Because not only did he give his speech, but he used the whole medium of an online speech very effectively. Go watch that speech at that link, and you'll see what I mean. And Randy emphasized that when he was talking about Mike.
Thanks.
And you know, Keith had to bring up that Tall Tales speech contest, since that's the one I lost to him. one of the two contests I can remember at the district level I was in where if my speaking position had been different in the contest, I might have won. So you just had to bring that up, didn't you, Keith?
Yes,
But
I
in
did.
essence, what you were saying, I really don't think you are disagreeing with the point I was making. The essence of it is, you know your speech so well, you know your message so well, that you can give it, and I say it doesn't have to be an apple pie memorized order, but you know, if that's the way you work, that's fine. That's how you do it. And that may work for other people. It may not work for some. I tend to find that if I try to memorize every speech word for word, line for line, sentence for sentence, that it's almost a sure thing that I will lose it at some point in the contest. I've been fortunate enough that I haven't lost it and ever become irrecoverable during any speech contest, but that's where I'm almost guaranteed that I'm going to lose the train at some point. But I know the speech so well that I'm able to come back and get back to what the main line of the speech was.
Randy, you brought up something that brought a question to my mind. What is the best speaking order? Where is the best place for a speaker?
All right. There's a lot of dispute, a lot of backyard theory. Personally, I don't think there is a best position in a speech contest. It all depends upon the dynamics of that particular contest. In most of the, and I've judged international contests at the Toastmasters International Convention at least 3 times, I think, maybe more, but I think it's at least 3 times. And I've watched many others. And in my experience, there will be some contests where you will go through and it doesn't matter what order the speaker was in, that speaker just instantly, once you're into their speech, you say, this is it, this is the guy, or this is the gal. Then I've been in speech contests where somebody early in the contest, 1, 2, 3, maybe, I'm starting to think, this is the person, you know, this is it. And then somebody comes on a little bit later and I say, you know, this, oh, I was mistaken. This is the one, you know, and that's where maybe that position helped the second speaker. I don't know. Then I've been in other contests where I'm judging, and at the end of the contest, all the speakers like, almost, you know, I hate to admit this, I almost like it flip a coin, you know. And that happens very often at the internationals, because you've got to realize people who get to that level are very, very good, and very often who wins or who loses is very close. And I've also been a counter at the international convention, and it's amazing to see the wide disparity between many of the judges and how they figure them out and where they place people. So I don't think there is an absolute stone-clad rule that says that you always want to be the last speaker because that leaves the last image and that person's going to win. I don't think there's a rule that says blow them out of the park with the number 1 and then everybody else is just trying to measure up. I just don't think it works that way. It depends upon the dynamics and the personalities in that particular speech contest. You can win just as easily from position 3 or 4 as you can from 1 or 5. So
From my standpoint, I always want to be after Randy. Because again, in 2014, as we're at that contest, Randy went second. The first guy got up, gave a great speech. It was very humorous. People laughed at it. Randy got up and gave a great speech. The audience was all laughing and everything else. I'm sitting there going, oh, shoot, Randy's finally got me. Then the third speaker gets up and gives a very flat speech. Absolutely. Her one-liners are going nowhere. The topics are going nowhere. The audience is not reacting. They are quiet. And the person up front is just absolutely dying. It's like one of those Johnny Carson things where none of the jokes match at all. I'm sitting in the back of the room getting mic'd up and I'm going, wait a minute. one, I've got to warm the audience up, and two, I've got to beat Randy again. How am I going to do this? And all the way walking up there after being introduced, I'm standing there going, I mean, this is 2014, so it's been a few years ago. I still remember this. This is the nervousness, Trammell. I'm like, oh my God. Not only do I have to warm up the audience, I have to beat Randy. How am I going to do this? After the speech was done, I sat down and I went over time. I thought I went over time, and I didn't. And Randy comes up to me afterwards and he said, dang it, you got me again, second place. Gosh darn it. In 97, sitting in the Sheraton Hotel, which used to be the Trammell, the Playboy Bunny Club in Omaha. Anyway, in the Sheraton Hotel down there, as we get up and we draw numbers, that was the first time that I competed against Randy at district and actually had the number after his. So I gave my speech that time after his speech, and that was the humorous speech contest. And I remember one of the other contestants, not Randy, she had gone before me. And as I'm giving my speech and the audience is laughing like crazy, I look across the room at her. She is looking down at her plate because it was a dinner meeting. She's crying in her plate. She has her hands in her face. She's like, oh, shoot. And I'm like, okay, I got one at least. Maybe not Randy because he's very experienced. He's been around for a while. He knows what he's doing, but I at least got one of the contestants. So speaking order, you're right. It doesn't matter because it's based on the decisions. It's based on there's so many factors outside of just speaking order. The judges, the timing, the atmosphere, the crowd. You can win from any position.
I have to give Keith his due. Yeah. Every time except one, when we've been in the same contest together, I've lost to that son of a whatever. But
Well, Randy, aren't you his mentor?
pardon me?
Were you his mentor?
No.
Oh, I would never
competitor.
want to have that close a relationship with Jones. No, no. Well, you know, maybe in some ways.
Yes.
The only other contest I was ever in where I thought my speech position had something to do was probably the speech for which I am regretfully best remembered. And that was the loser speech, if anybody ever saw that. I started out the speech that I think it was the 7 worst words in the world are, and the second place winner is Randy Pryor. And I even said, you go through that contest and you come in second, and you're a loser. Everybody remembers that speech, but I came in second to some other fellow whose name I don't remember, whom I've never seen again, who didn't even show up at the ending banquet of the convention to accept his trophy, because that was when we delayed the results to the end of the conference. And that still rankles, but even so, I think it's one of the best speeches I've ever given. I enjoyed it. My speeches become my babies, and I remember, and then I have a mourning ceremony when the contest cycle is over, and I don't get to give that speech anymore. So anyway.
From the other standpoint, one more thing. In the 1999 convention in Chicago, Illinois, international speech contest, when Craig Valentine walked on stage, and I don't remember exactly what his order, he was not first, I know that much. When he walked on stage, I went, that guy won it. The charisma that he walked onto the stage with before he uttered a word, I'm like, if there's any way I don't know if you can even find the video for that anymore. I may have it on VHS, but anyway, the contest, when he walked on the stage, it was like everybody in the room went, oh, wow, we're in for a treat now. And he won the contest. So Craig Valentine, 1999, if you could ever find it, it's a great thing. Oh, Eric is here.
Eric, I'd like to introduce Eric Biva. He is our